The show is on!
JohnFord.radio.
Well, here we go again. It's another Evening Ranker. I do believe this is Evening Ranker number 38. If you keep track of such things, you know, people number their podcasts, so I figured I should number mine as well. I guess it helps you keep track of things. I'm John Ford, your Evening Rankerist, and so glad you could come along with us today on this little excursion. As I've mentioned before, I do this basically to shoot off my big mouth, and half of what I'm saying on here probably shouldn't be taken too seriously, or with any seriousness at all. But that, it's another story. Every once in a while, you come across something on the internet or Weber tubes, that is just so bizarre, and so, in my opinion, stupid, that it makes you do that sideways thing that dogs do, where they turn their heads to the side, they cock their head. Can I say cock?
No.
They cock their head and kind of look at you like, brr? And I came across one of those this week, and it was a New York Times op-ed article written by a Linfield College professor by the name of Daniel Pollock Pelzner. Daniel Pollock Pelzner. I have no idea how to pronounce his name. I don't even know where Linfield College is. Couldn't tell you. Haven't got a clue. Anyways, he wrote this op-ed in the New York Times espousing that Mary Poppins was a racist. And it's a serious op-ed. It's not a joke. And the reason I bring that up is there's this one Twitter account that I follow, Tatiana McGrath, who plays the role of the angered social justice warrior. And in reality, it's a parody account. I mean, she just posts the most ridiculous social justice warrior stuff you could ever possibly imagine. And it's just a parody account. And a few days ago, maybe about a week ago, she did a parody saying that because of the coal dust on the face of Mary Poppins, that Mary Poppins was a racist and the film should be deleted from history.
Don't touch it! It's the history eraser button, you fool!
So anyways... So then about a week later, and ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, especially since we're talking Mary Poppins here, that was a joke. So about a week later, this guy writes this actual op-ed where it's not a joke. It's in the New York Times, although a lot of people might think the New York Times might definitely be a joke. Yeah. But to a lot of people, it is a joke. To some people, it's very serious journalism. I guess that just all depends on where you sit and on what side of the street. So this Linfield College professor accused Julie Andrews of blacking up her face during the rooftop scene with the song Step in Time, which I can't even remember how it goes. I'm not a big fan of musicals myself. She then powders her nose and cheeks, and they get even blacker. The whole thing was supposed to be just, it's kind of a joke. It's cute. So she got dirty with Dick Van Dyke. Boy, did she get dirty with Dick Van Dyke. She got dirty with Dick Van Dyke, got the coal dust all over her face, and to make it even more of a joke, she goes to powder. Oh, I must get rid of the coal dust, and it makes it even blacker. It's a joke, right? It's the kind of silly jokes they used to do in family movie shows, Disney movies. Now, according to Linfield College professor Daniel Pollock Pelzner, the guy who wrote the article in the op-ed, it's all sort of this big underlying scheme of the racist mentality of the world, and that he wrote this so that Disney would think twice before releasing their new version of Dumbo to make sure that it didn't have any racist imagery. We can't have any racist imagery in Dumbo. And of course, all this is going on while Ralph Northam, the Virginia governor, the Democratic governor of Virginia, not a Republican, so as you know, it's got to be an equal opportunity mudslinging contest. And as it came out just about a day or so ago, Attorney General Mark Herring, who's next in line. Oh, this is so confusing. This is all so confusing, but it all fits in. Just bear with me for a moment. Who's next in line for governor after Northam and Fairfax. And Fairfax is the one who's in line first. But he's the one that's had the sexual allegations against him. Good God, what are they doing there in Virginia, for God's sakes?
I don't honestly know.
Now, Fairfax has come out and admitted that as a 19-year-old college student in 1980, he wore blackface to a Halloween party.
Oh, my God.
It's the unforgivable sin. It's become the alleged or perceived unforgettable. Yes, that's what they are. It's become the perceived alleged unforgivable sin. It's like every other offense you could possibly have done in your life. You could have been an axe murderer. And as long as you've come back and said, I'm sorry, I was an axe murderer. I've turned my life around. Now I want to be governor of Virginia. One thing to bring up here, too, is that as offensive as it may be, it's not illegal to be a racist.
No.
It may be awful, but it's not against the law. It's not like you can't vote if they found out you were a racist. If you committed a felony, you can't vote. It's not like you can't vote if you were a racist or are a racist. You can't buy a firearm if they found out that you had committed a felony in the past. So it's not illegal to be a racist. Yet the left, the progressives, and God, I hate that term because there's nothing progressive about them at all anymore. There's a small minority that are progressive, and I consider myself to be a left-leaning libertarian. I even took one of those stupid online polls one time and it said, yeah, you're left and you're libertarian. But the left always was libertarian. It was always about the individual and the freedom of the individual. And somewhere along the line, it's become this collective social movement where groups are more important and the collective is more important than the individual. And, I'm not even smart enough to explain all that to you, and it would take hours and hours and hours. Go find a Jordan Peterson lecture or, something like that from somebody that's a hell of a lot more intelligent than I am. But let me continue to rant here for just a little bit here.
Great.
The concept where someone gets accused of racism, not even if it's been proven that they were a racist, is the new scarlet letter. It is the new unforgivable sin. And the social justice warrior left, they present themselves as this criminal justice reform party. Progressives, and I hate that term again because they're not progressive. Progressives are preaching that the aim of the system is rehabilitation for people that are in jail. It shouldn't be punishment. They should be rehabilitated so they can join society. And the criminal behavior is forged by social influences rather than the result of, bad choices that people may have made and have been flawed individuals during their life. No, it's the society that's done this to them. All of this can be forgiven with one exception, and that's something that's not even against the law, and that would be racism.
You all ought to be ashamed of yourselves.
Not even proof that somebody was a racist, but all you have to do is allege that they possibly were a racist. It has become the new unforgivable sin for the social justice warrior left. And if you look at it even deeper, the new left has become the new right because they're preaching a Christian message of hating the sin but loving the sinner, except for when it comes to racism. The Americans' elite culture, personified by people like Kamala Harris and Julian Castro, want Northam to step down. And I'm sure they want to destroy every single copy of Mary Poppins because, as we know, she got coal dust on her face, so she's a racist.
He's right. You're right.
It's just new clothes for old puritanicalism. It's not the right that's teaching us how to be puritanical. It's now the left that is forcing their social blueprint on how to live our lives and how we should be judged. Even if you look further back, like somebody like, what was his name? West Virginia Senator Robert Byrd. Now, he didn't just play a Klansman. He didn't just dress up as a Klansman, allegedly. He was an actual Klan leader. He was an actual Klan leader. But if you're old enough to remember, there goes my dog again. Every time I do a podcast, a dog, ruff, ruff.
Dog talk.
Now, when Byrd shed the mortal coil, the Democratic Party did acknowledge the possibility of redemption for Byrd because they marked his passing by saluting his years of service, not by just judging him for what many consider to be a mistake in his life of being a Klansman. And I would certainly consider, being a mistake. It's certainly regrettable. It's just kind of a stupid thing to do. Or look at what's happening now with Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson in an interview, and I'm sort of doing this off the top of my head because I don't remember exactly. He came out and said that he had a friend of his who was sexually assaulted, and it was a black person that assaulted him. And he said, regrettably, the way I felt after that happened is I felt within my bones that every black person I saw, I wanted to just beat the living crap out of. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. He didn't act on it. And he discussed this to show how this can take over your life and how wrong it was. But now the social justice warriors are going after him, saying, you did racist things, you were racist at one point in time, so everything you do and everything you've ever done and all that on and on and on and on and on holds no weight, and you are corrupt and you should be thrown into the trash and you should be thrown into the trash bin of history.
Oh my God!
And he wasn't even saying, look, I support this. He was talking about how this made him feel and how he wanted to act out on it, but he knew better and he didn't. And he was talking about how awful that was. The social justice warriors love to preach criminal justice reform, that the aim of the system should be rehabilitation for all and not punishment, yet they want to punish you for something you may have done. Can't even prove that, for example, Ralph Northam was even in that picture that was on his yearbook. They want to punish you for something you may have done 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago.
Be afraid.
That under today's cultural climate is disagreeable and doesn't fit in how they view the world. It's really sad because the left is embracing these thoughts and norms that used to only belong and be associated to the political far right, the religious right of the Reagan era, where it embraces this whole concept of us versus you, creating tribes, creating collectivism, and it just creates more tribes on the other end of the political spectrum, and joy and punishment. It's interesting. Joy and punishment for people who may have thought racist thoughts or even said racist things or gone in blackface, whether you even think that was, and at the time that wouldn't even be considered racist, it would just be considered funny. Could you call Al Jolson a racist because he was in blackface? No, it was, back then it was considered, it was a musical. But in today's climate, it's racism because we're so much higher than we were before. We've evolved so much, and we must view everything that has happened in history that we don't agree with by today's social norms. It should just all end up in a trash heap until everything ends up in a trash heap.
I believe that's what you do with garbage, you idiot.
That had to be the ugliest garbage ever to go over the airwaves.
Don't be offended. We're always this way. JohnFord.radio.
And now I'm going to continue my old man yelling at the cloud routine. Hey, you up there! You know, and some other nonsense that I've come across this week on the interwebber netter tubes is a news story out of Hawaii that the legislators in Hawaii are actually considering making smoking tobacco, making cigarettes illegal. They call it the Hawaii smoking ban. But let's face it, it's basically just making cigarettes and tobacco illegal. Now, they have medical marijuana in Hawaii, and I'm sure that they're very close to legalizing marijuana in general. Why wouldn't they? I mean, even Texas is eventually going to legalize marijuana, for God's sakes.
Deliciously different marijuana. Deliciously different marijuana.
But yeah, under a proposal before the state legislature in Hawaii, cigarette sales, this is how they're planning on doing this. Cigarette sales would be effectively banned outright by 2024. That's not that far off. How they would manage this is sort of ramping it up, just knocking it away just a little bit at a time, raising the minimum age for buying cigarettes to 30 years of age in 2020. By 2022, no one under 50 could buy cigarettes, and 2 years later, no one under 100 would be allowed to buy cigarettes. Now who's going to be 100 years old and smoking? They're not going to live that long. And people are certainly aware that smoking is bad for your health. It's not good for you. Smoking's not good for you.
No.
Neither is sugar consumption.
No.
Right? Look at all the diabetes we got. Look at all the diabetes we got in this country. Is that next? Now, I know that Hawaii is a big sugar cane producer, aren't they? Especially on the Big Island, I think. Could you imagine the kerfluffle? Could you imagine the weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth if they decided to outlaw and ban sugar?
Maybe, maybe not.
Seems to me that would be next on the list. I mean, haven't we learned anything from Prohibition? How Prohibition never works out? I would recommend to anybody that has not seen it, Ken Burns, the documentary filmmaker who made his fame and glory in the beginning, especially with the Civil War documentary he did. He did a great series on Prohibition. Now Ken Burns is not, a crazy conservative that I'm aware of. He's just a documentary guy. And he did this great series on Prohibition, and the conclusion in the end is it never works. So all Hawaii is going to end up doing is creating, if they do try and pass this law, is creating a illegal market for cigarettes. Pretty soon you'll have gang members shooting at each other on the streets of Honolulu in cigarette sale wars, as this stuff goes underground. I mean, you have to wonder just how stupid people can be, how stupid politicians and legislators can be.
It's hard to believe how incompetent our country is run.
Well, no, you don't have to wonder, because we pretty much see that every day on the state, local, federal, whatever level. It's like the biggest morons in the universe end up becoming the politicians. And how people can get so wrapped up into politics, it just boggles my mind, because it's obvious that these people are just morons. They're stupid. And as I've mentioned before, I don't try to get too wrapped up in politics because I had the conclusion many, many years ago that politicians, by their very nature, are liars, criminals, and thieves. And expecting anything else out of them is just an exercise in futility and insanity. But you got to wonder who's in charge. Banning the sale of tobacco. But it's going to get to the point where marijuana will be legal, but it already is. Medical marijuana is legal in California, and tobacco will be illegal. Sometimes, I used to think about, my dad, who died many, many years ago, what he would think of the world today as the old man yells at the cloud, where marijuana would be legal, but cigarettes would be illegal. He would think that he would have such a hard time just thinking about the concept that he couldn't go to a bar and have a smoke. And you pretty much can't. The bottom line is Prohibition never worked.
No.
And never will work. And anytime you have Prohibition, you create an illegal market. And when you create an illegal market, you create criminals. And when you create criminals, you create violent crime. And when you create violent crime, you create the industrial complex of the prison system, which we have. How is this a good idea? Are they going to throw people in jail for black market cigarettes in Hawaii?
Yes.
Have they thought their cunning plan through? I think not. Did you know that California last year passed over 1,000 new laws? As a person who believes that we need fewer laws, outside of laws against violent crime and things like that, we don't need a bunch of new laws. So the exact number is 1,016 new laws will take effect in this year, this calendar year of 2019 in the state of California. Now, if Hawaii bans smoking, California will be next to follow suit. They've already basically banned plastic straws, probably one of the silliest laws ever in the history of the universe. It's not like plastic straws litter everything everywhere. And when I go into the grocery store, every time I go, I make an effort to buy about 5 or 6 packs of plastic straws. Went into Target the other day, they don't even sell them anymore. And this is in Texas, by God. In Texas, we don't have a problem with plastic straws getting stuck into the nose of sea turtles. Not that I'm aware of.
God, that is so not true.
One other law that passed and it's hard to pick out some of the new laws when you got over 1,000 of them. One other one is that only milk and water will be published as beverage options on kids' menus in sit-down restaurants. They passed a law telling business owners that own restaurants what they can put on the menu. I mean, outside of, a threat, what business is it of theirs? Unless the menu said, if you sit in this chair, we'll shoot you and kill you and throw you out the window. They can only put milk and water on the menu. That doesn't mean they can't serve kids soda pop, but I'm sure that's next. One law that didn't make it on the books, 2018, California became the first state to propose regulating online speech. That was SB 1424, the Internet Social Media and Advisory Group. We know how well this works out. Outgoing Governor Jerry Brown had vetoed that one. Thank God. He still had at least one brain cell left. It would have required the state attorney general to establish an advisory committee. Sounds very Soviet, doesn't it? An advisory committee. To review and create a plan to stop the spread of false information through internet-based social media platforms, whatever false information is. Now, could you imagine the people that would be in charge of this? It would just be information they didn't like. Who decides? Who's the decider? Do you want Donald Trump being the decider? Do you want a bunch of people like Donald Trump being the decider on what information could get disseminated on the internet, on the interwebber tubes?
No.
Do you want somebody like Ocasio-Cortez deciding what true factual information is? I think not.
No.
Would you have wanted Richard Nixon being on this advisory council? Someone like him? Nuh-uh.
No.
That's why these things are bad. Bad ideas.
Not a good idea.
And if that's not enough, with Hawaii wanting to ban smoking and probably passing this stupid law that by 2022, nobody under the age of 50 can buy cigarettes. 2024, no one under the age of 100 will be allowed to buy cigarettes. There's now a push, and this is not necessarily in Hawaii, and I don't disagree with this. There's now a push to legalize magic mushrooms. Give me my magic mushrooms. I want my psilocybin, baby.
Is this trip really necessary?
The reason is it's believed to be helpful for PTSD and depression in microdoses, I would imagine. Well, sure. The thing I don't understand is a lot of this comes from liberal legislators. And I hate that term because they're not liberal thinking at all. And it's just, and it's so crazy how this thought process works, how they want to legalize marijuana and legalize magic mushrooms and end the prohibition on them, but yet they want to push for prohibition on other things that they don't like. This just shows you how the concept of the advisory councils in California would be such a bad idea. Because it all just ends up being which is, how I feel about that particular issue. It's not fact-based. It's not based on liberty or libertarian values. It's just based on how they feel, what their social platform is. Personally, I wish they'd all fall off their social platform into the Pacific Ocean.
It's the John Ford Podcast, the Evening Rancor.
JohnFord.radio.
Well, outside of the Bezos pecker being a big deal this week, I just love saying Bezos pecker. I love hearing the guys on CNN say Bezos pecker. I know it's sophomoric, but it gives me a little thrill, a little tingle up the spine. The other thing that's making big news this week is the new Green Deal, the Green New Deal. Is it? I forget which one it is. From Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I just don't even know what to make of this. I find her, this woman, very amusing. To me, she's sort of like the liberal version of Sara Palin. The left has finally got their own Sara Palin, except she's maybe not as bright as Sara Palin, which is a really, really scary thought. So anyway, she introduced this thing this week, this new Green Deal or the Green New Deal or the Green Acres Deal. I'm not sure which. It's one or the other. And it includes her long-term plan for changing the world into Venezuela, into a new socialist utopia. We've kind of heard all this before, haven't we? How many socialist utopias have there been? Could count quite a few of them. Of course, there's the former Soviet Union. There's the former communist China, which is now just a totalitarian state. You've North Korea. That's one of my favorite socialist states. It's done so well. Of course, now we've got Venezuela, Cambodia with Pol Pot. And they always keep saying that if somebody would just do it right, and I'm sure Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the one that's going to do it right. But if somebody would just do it right, then we'd end up with this socialist utopia. But it ain't happened yet. But she's trying. God bless her. I really do feel like her heart is in the right place. I mean, it's not, like on the right side of her chest or anything. But I think she feels like what she's doing is correct. That what she's doing is actually going to help people. I would disagree. Was it traditionally that the Jewish folks, those fine Israelis, and I could be wrong with this, but I seem to remember this from my theological training somewhere in the past. Basically, what they said was that no one is an adult until they're 30. Well, she's 29. But I look back at what I used to think when I was 29. Boy, what a dumbass I was. Not that I'm still not a dumbass today. I'm just maybe a little bit less of a dumbass.
Oh, please.
So this Green New Deal or this New Green Deal or whatever it is, by the way, she has really big teeth. Have you noticed that?
Hello.
Here's some of the things that are in this deal. And of course, no one knows where the money would come from for doing this. I do believe she said on one of the talking head shows that even if all the billionaires in the world gave all their money to this new Green New Deal thing, it still wouldn't be enough to pay for it.
My ass.
So basically, here's like a rundown of some of the highlights of this. Rebuild every single building in the U.S. What the actual thing says that she submitted, her little outline for the Green New Deal or the New Green Deal or the Green New Deal or whatever it is, because we got trouble right here in River City. Anyways, upgrade or replace every building in the U.S. for state-of-the-art energy efficiency. Just that, what would that cost? What would that cost? Okay, maybe upgrade. Is somebody gonna pay for this? Or are they gonna give like tax breaks? No, ain't gonna be no tax breaks coming out of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And replace, so they tear them down and put new ones up. Yeah, that's gonna work. End all traditional forms of energy in the next 10 years. The Green New Deal is a, quote, 10-year plan to mobilize every aspect of American society at scale not since World War II to achieve a net zero greenhouse gas emissions. Why is it that is the most important thing in the universe?
I don't honestly know.
Because they already believe that global warming is a thing that's going to destroy the planet.
What makes you think that?
The planet's going to be just fine. We may end up killing off ourselves, as George Carlin says, but the planet's going to go on just fine without us. Look at the dinosaurs. They died off, the planet continues. Even if there's no life on the planet's just fine until the Earth implodes from the sun, going supernova or something. They also want to ban nuclear energy within 10 years if possible. Quote, it's unclear if we'll be able to decommission every nuclear plant within 10 years, but the plan is to transition off nuclear and all fossil fuels as soon as possible. Well, nuclear is very clean. So this is one thing that the liberals don't understand, and a lot of conservatives as well, is that nuclear power is just fine. It's very clean. If you look into the history of it, here's what the real problem is. The kind of reactors that we use can have meltdowns, like we had in Fukushima and problems like that. And I believe this all goes back to, Admiral Rickover, if my memory serves me well, and that he pushed for that type of a reactor because that worked best in a submarine. That's what he was interested in the nuclear reactors for, because it could be water cooled from the seawater. I think that's right, and it's kind of basic. But there are other kinds of reactors. There are salt reactors. There was a reactor that they built, it was somewhere out west. It was some sort of ultra-safe reactor. I can't think of the actual name for it. I could Google it, but I'm not going to do that. And they ran through all the stuff like that would happen with Fukushima. This is years ago, 20 years ago they built this thing. And it would never melt down because it was built in such a way that it won't melt down. There are plenty of ways that we can build safe nuclear power that are not the kind of, breeder reactors are safer, where you reuse the fuel, where you don't have to take the used up, spent up fuel rods. I am not a nuclear physicist, but I play one on TV. I play one on a podcast, where you can actually use the fuel from the reactor to refuel the reactor. Those rods refuel the reactor, so you don't end up having these toxic dumps.
Stink, stink.
It's just that, the whole nuke the whales thing that came out of the 70s and no more nukes, well-meaning hippies, they really wanted to save the world, save the planet, but they were wrong. There's nothing wrong with nuclear power. It's just that we built the wrong kinds of reactors, and the rest of the world builds the same kind of reactors. There are safe reactors that we can build. If you don't believe me, look into it. It's true. Here's another thing that Mrs. Greenie wants to do. She wants to build trains and get rid of airplanes. Build out high-speed rail at scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. What's wrong with airplanes? How are you going to get to England? How are you going to get to China? Maybe you don't want to go to China. How are you going to get to Japan? Are you sure they could build, imagine the expense of that. They could build rails across the ocean, sort of like underground things that float. I'm not sure it's possible. You could do it. But, the cost of doing that would be just insane. What do you do when a hurricane goes over the thing? And the push for high-speed rail in the United States, well, here's the problem, is that our corridors where you could have high-speed rail, with the exception of maybe Texas, Houston to San Antonio to Austin to Dallas. But if you look at the Northeast, it is so compact. The amount of money that it would take to buy land to build a high-speed rail, because you can't use, this is the problem now, the passenger trains run by Amtrak, a government subsidy, by the way. For the most part, they have to use rail lines that are used by freight, and those lines are owned by the freight companies. And the freight companies get priority on those lines because they own them. So you would have to build new rail systems. Now, could you imagine what it would take to demolish homes just in the New York Metro and buildings just in the New York Metro area to build high-speed rail? And then you'd have to go through Boston. Imagine how expensive that would be. So we're not like Europe, where you get off at the rail station and you just go walk to where you need to go. And the cores aren't as compact as they are in the Northeast, basically, is what it is. So, that's, how are you going to, who's going to pay for all this? That's the real question. Also, she mandates that all new jobs should be unionized. Ensure that all G&D jobs are union jobs and pay prevailing wages and hire local. Must include a carbon tax when not ruling a carbon tax out. But carbon tax should be a tiny part of the Green Deal. May include cap and trade. How much will it cost? God only knows how much it would cost. How will it be paid for? God only knows who would pay for it. The whole Green Deal thing is kind of insane. Even Nancy Pelosi, God bless her, said, no, it's nice. Thank you, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But, we'll look at it and we'll pat you on the head, you cute little 29-year-old thing with the giant teeth and the horse mouth.
Hello.
They know it's not going to happen. Who's she trying to kid? But the press just loves to pay attention to her. She's like the liberal Trump. She's like the liberal Sara Palin. And I'm glad she's around because it gives me somebody to laugh at.
Ha! Comrade! Congratulations from head of foreign delegation. Your show has been monitored regularly, and I am very pleased to advise that it has been designated as the most revolting show of all. As prize, you will receive late model Russian lawnmower, one medium-sized goat.
This program is for re-educational purposes only. Resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is probably intentional. Contents under pressure, use only as directed, some assembly required. Void where inhibited, batteries not included, use only as directed. If confusion persists, consult your physician. Driver does not carry cash. This disclaimer is subject to change without notice.
I'm the happiest guy.
He's the luckiest guy.
'Cause I just bought a new Ford.
From a wonderful dealer.
Wow, what a dealer!
For a Ford or a fine used car.
The John Ford Podcast.